to the insurance company that tried to break my heart. I am stronger than you ever gave me credit for. You thought I'd never leave? Well, today, I let you go. Today, I found Geico. In just 15 minutes, Geico has given me the sweet savings on my car insurance that you always promised, but never delivered. It's a brand new day, and the sun shines on my Geico automobile insurance policy with 1,000 golden rays. And never looking back. Nancy, in New York.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Grueling Truth, hosted by Coach Mike Goodpaster. I am the moderator, Troy Otradovic, until Coach Goodpaster takes full reins of the studio. Coach, how are you doing tonight?
All right. How you doing, Troy? We're just digging out of snow down here. Probably the same thing up there.
Yeah, I called it. It's funny, I was talking to Evan, and I'm not going to take up too much time because we got a great show tonight. But I called what we have a little winter blast today. And having a winter blast in PA is like a appetizer out in Wisconsin. What we got today is nothing out there, but we got some snow. I had to shovel the sidewalk and brush the snow off the cars. Thing is, Coach, I don't mind the snow. I don't mind the snow at all. It's the frigid temperatures I don't like. And the wind is terrible. I hate the wind. The wind goes right through you. So, but I can't complain. I choose to live here. I have to deal with it. So if I want to complain about it, I should probably just move, right?
Nah. Might as well just go. You'd have something to complain about anywhere you go, heck. As you get older, it doesn't matter what the weather is. You feel like crap anyway.
Oh, now you're aging us, aren't you? You're making us
well,
old.
we're aging.
But, well, I know you said that we have a special caller calling in tonight that is eventually probably going to be your co-host, and I see him in the studio, so I'll let him in. You can introduce him, Coach.
All right, this is Matt Andruscavage. Unfortunately, he's a San Francisco 49er fan, which you wouldn't think I would get along with since I'm a Bengals fan, but Matt's very knowledgeable. I think he said he's done some podcasts before with his dad. He used to have a show. Actually, I think he's going to eventually be a contributing writer at Sports Rants, hopefully. He wrote a story today, which I retweeted about Roger Craig. You go to @RiverMonster11, you can find that, and everybody ought to give it a read. It's a really good story. But I think Matt has agreed to be my co-host on the show eventually here in the next week or two whenever Troy gets around or gets enough time to show me how to run the studios. So, Matt, how you doing tonight?
Oh, real good, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
No problem.
Hey, Matt, this is Troy. How you
Troy,
doing,
good
buddy?
to meet you. Doing real good.
Hey, Coach
as good as a 49er fan can be talking to a Bengal fan, right?
Well, you dominate me, so that's all right.
Coach told me you're from Wisconsin.
Yes, I am. All my life.
I'm born and raised in Green Bay. So, what part of Wisconsin are you from?
The lower part, around the Milwaukee area.
Okay, so you know where Whitewater is because that's where I went to college. I went to school at UW Whitewater.
I actually considered going to Whitewater.
Well, enough of the formalities and the small talk, guys. Great show tonight. We're going to talk top 10 quarterbacks. But before I do that, I do want to get a quick opinion. Evan and I talked on the Red Light Sports Ramble tonight about the relevance of the NFL Combine. And so, Coach, I'll let you go first. Mike, then I'll let you follow up with that. Coach, what are your thoughts of the NFL Combine? How relevant is it? We see all these great numbers that go on with pads, the fast 40 times, the bench presses, all these drills, and these guys wow a team, and all of a sudden they change their draft sequence, and they just say, wow, this guy had a great combine. We're going to draft him high, and then he doesn't develop in the NFL. So, Coach, how relevant is the NFL Combine in the year 2015?
I think it's relevant more in the player interviews and getting to know a player and the content of the player's character. I mean, to me, I could really care less what your 40 time is. I think Jerry Rice ran a 4.65 at the Combine. He turned out being a pretty good wide receiver. So overall, I think a lot of people fall in love, especially the Oakland Raiders, with players that are fast. or players that can bench press a lot of weight. But it doesn't really show you the technique, and they're guys running around in shorts. And let's face it, in an NFL game, well, at least as of today, you're not running around in shorts. Goodell may change that in the next few years. But I think overall it's relevant. I think you just have to take everything you see there with a grain of salt.
Sounds good. Mike, what about you, buddy?
I feel basically the same way. I think it was Bill Parcells fell in love with quarterback, I believe it was Pat White back in 2010. He got wowed at the combine. And even last year, Johnny Manziel shows up and he's gonna go in pads. And he's gonna wow everybody. Well, anybody can throw 40 yards downfield when you're not getting rushed and to a wide open receiver who's not covered. But look at how that turned out for Cleveland. I think the combine can actually hurt you if you fall in love with the wrong guy. So I would agree with the coach that player interviews and character is really where it's at, and all this other stuff really does not necessarily translate on the field.
Yeah, and I agree with you both. That's kind of the road we went down with this. You know, it's become a spectacle, of course. Today's world evolves around money and ways to make money, and so the networks have found a way to actually make the combine generate money for the networks. So I will say, Coach, you know, I did live in Indianapolis for a little bit. I had a chance to go to the NFL Combine 1 year. They're giving away tickets for the public to go in, and I got to go see the O-linemen. And I'll tell you what, as a fan, it was nice to go in and see it, but the relevance to an NFL team, I'm not sure what it has in the year 2015. But just wanted to get your guys' quick thought on that. And what I'm going to do tonight, Coach, you've got your future co-host on the line, so I'm not gonna barge in too much, but I'm going to hang on the line and maybe throw a comment in or two. But I'm going to let you two guys battle it out and talk about the top 10 quarterbacks of all time. So take it away, Coach. All you.
Well, I know Matt, as a 49er fan, his number one is Joe Montana. Correct, Matt?
Yeah, that's correct. And for the longest time, I believe we were always in total agreement on that.
Yeah, we were until recently. And, I mean, we're still pretty – I mean, I think Tom Brady – I got Brady at number one now. It's hard to ignore 6 Super Bowl appearances. I still think they're pretty much equal, though, with the top 2. I don't think we're going to have much debate in the top 2 until we get to number probably 3 or 4.
And I guess I'd just like to clarify that, or my position on that. As much of a Montana fan that I am, as clutch as I think he is, while I'd probably still prefer him, I am not one of these homer guys that isn't going to be able to acknowledge Tom Brady. I think a very strong argument can be made for Tom Brady, and I will not quibble or quarrel with anyone who says Tom Brady's the best, just because I think you can make a great argument for it.
All right. Now, Matt, I'm from Indiana. If you're going to be my co-host, I don't want to have to be looking up words all the time, so this quibble and quarrel you're going to have to watch, okay? Who you got at number 3?
Number 3, I got John Elway.
Oh, we're in total agreement there, too. We need to get to somewhere where we don't agree. With Elway, though, I think, and a lot of people will say, well, you know, he lost 3 Super Bowls. Why don't you have Marino up here? But to me, Dan Marino had a very similar situation with his teams where he didn't have much of a running game. He had a mediocre defense. He got to the Super Bowl once. Elway did it 3 times, and Elway beat a team in the 86 and 87 Browns, especially the 86 Browns. I think were a lot better team than what Elway. I mean, they were a lot better team than what Elway's team was. And, I mean, the 98-yard drive in the last 4 minutes of the AFC Championship game, I think is the greatest drive I've seen in history. So I think when you weigh in overall everything what he did, and then the fact that when he got a running back, he wins 2 Super Bowls, becomes the MVP, beats Brett Favre, which a lot of people say Brett Favre should be there. My biggest reason why Brett Favre's not in my top 10 is most of the memories of Brett Favre's career end with him throwing an interception. And the one time he had a chance to change that perception was Super Bowl 32. He gets the ball back down a touchdown, and he goes 4 and out with 4 incomplete passes immediately. What are your thoughts on John Elway?
Well, John Elway, to me, did the most with the least. Like you said, and you look at what Elway had around him from the start of his career in '83. Of course, he was kind of platooning with Steve DeBerg, but when he kind of took over the reins, and you go through the '80s, look at the teams, look at the players that he had, look at the receivers he's throwing to: Ricky Nattiel, Vance Johnson, Mark Jackson, Clarence Kay. These are not household names. The running backs: Sammy Winder, Bobby Humphrey, the only 1,000-yard rusher in the '80s. The defenses were decent, but largely it was John Elway putting the Broncos on his back and willing that team to 3 Super Bowls in 4 seasons and beating some really quality Browns teams, like you said, especially that '86 team, on the road, in the dog pound, 98 yards. Definitely one of the greatest drives I've ever seen as well.
And also in 1984, if you remember, the Broncos, I believe, were the number 1 seed, and Elway hurt his thigh. Yeah, Elway hurt his thigh. Middle of the first quarter, played injured, and they lost, I think, 24-17 to Pittsburgh. So a case could be made, if he doesn't get hurt, they beat Pittsburgh, Dan Marino never makes it to the Super Bowl.
Very possible, and that's the thing about Dan Marino. They got there the one time, but there were they just were never really able to get that kind of swagger back, and Marino in a lot of his big games just never came up big. Elway came up big in a lot of those games. Now, he didn't do well in the Super Bowl, but they weren't going to beat the '86 Giants. They weren't going to beat the '89 49ers. So I don't completely think Elway was a choker in the '80s, even though he didn't play well. I just think the fact that they got there with those teams was a pretty amazing feat in of itself. And then when you give him the tools, what does he do in the '90s? He go and win 2 Super Bowls.
Yeah, and wins a Super Bowl MVP in his last game he ever played.
Exactly.
Who do you got at number 4?
Number 4, and I think this is where we're going to start to disagree.
Yeah, you don't like the old guys that much, I guess.
No. It's not that I don't like the old guys. Don't get me wrong. I have a lot of respect for the Otto Grahams, the Bart Starrs, the Sammy Baugh, the Norvan Brocklins, Bob Waterfields, those type of quarterbacks. I just think it's very, very, very hard once you get earlier than the 1970s to start comparing those quarterbacks to today. I don't want to discount any of the greatness. I'm just not ready at this point. I don't have it sorted out where I can discuss Otto Graham and those guys in terms of comparing against the modern era. So I'm going to go with Roger Staubach, one of my all-time favorite quarterbacks, captain comeback. Saw him so many times pull a victory out of his hat. Guy won 2 Super Bowls. Darn near pulled off. Could have easily pulled off 4. Played those. They were the team that played Pittsburgh very tough in the '70s, not the Vikings.
Yeah. My 4 is Otto Graham. I mean, I don't even have Staubach in my top 10. When I originally sat down, the way I did this, I sat down, I just wrote down off the top of my head what I thought were the 10 greatest quarterbacks. And then I went in and compared their stats, compared their accomplishments, championships, and everything. And, I mean, outside of the 2 Super Bowls, which is a big deal, I don't have him there. And, I mean, when you look at his stats statistically, even playoff stats, it didn't compare to the other guys. To me, Roger Staubach is at a point right now that Eli Manning's at. He's won 2 Super Bowls, and he played really well in one of them. But there's still something missing to get him into the top 10 to me. But I think Roger Staubach was a great quarterback. My Otto Graham, I know he's an older guy, and the way I quantify when I compare to quarterbacks from 50s, 60s, 70s is there are 2 or 3 guys that I think could play today that played back then. And in fact, with Otto Graham, he's the only man that every year he played in the championship game at the end of it. He won 7 titles. He had an overall winning percentage of 81.4, which is a record I don't think will ever be broken. He won 114 games, lost 20. His playoff record was 9-3. 3-time NFL MVP. And when I watch him play on film, I see a guy that if you put him with training today would be able to play today. And I think there's a lot to be said that, he's definitely one of the 2 greatest quarterbacks, probably the first 30 to 40 years in NFL history. So, I mean, quantifying it's kind of like comparing a boxer. If you go back and watch an old film of Jack Johnson, he doesn't look like he's that good. But at the time, he was the best. And he beat everybody. Otto Graham beat everybody. I mean, he was probably the first, him and Sammy Ball and Johnny Unitas were the first modern-day quarterbacks. When you watch them play, you watch the way the offense played, not exactly the way it is today, but, I mean, let's face it, the 70s and 80s offense wasn't exactly like it is today. But
agreed.
That's my take on it. I mean, they're both great quarterbacks, though, so we don't really have a disagreement there because you didn't bring up Brett Favre. All right, number 5, who you got?
Number 5.
I got Johnny Unitas at number 5.
That's who I have. I have Johnny U at number 5. The first big game quarterback, the father of the 2-minute offense. In all respect for Otto Graham, that 1958 game, I mean, well, it wasn't really a great game, so to speak, but the last couple of minutes of that game were amazing.
Yeah, it was on national TV for the first time. The last couple of minutes were great. Everybody remembers the end of the game. Unitas, to me, was the guy that really revolutionized playing quarterback in the NFL. He won 4 NFL titles, 4-time league MVP. I think he fits both of our criteria there. Who you got at number 6?
Number 6, I've got Steve Young.
Steve Young? Oh, we're close. I got Bart Starr, which I don't know. Do you have Bart Starr in your top 10?
Bart Starr is not in my top 10, but again, that's only because he's prior to 1970, and I just haven't quite gotten that sorted out as how I want to fairly compare those guys. Because you look at Bart Starr, all respect for everything he accomplished, but I didn't fear. You look at those Packer games, I didn't fear Bart Starr. I feared Lombardi. I feared the machine. Bart Starr to me. The machine without the proper captain is not going to. It's just like Bill Belichick. Nobody feared him in 1993. No. He had Bernie Kosar, Bernie Testaverde. Nobody feared him. So the thing is this: Lombardi was one of the greatest coaches of all time. But without Starr, I mean, if he ends up with Akili Smith, does he end up being one of the greatest coaches of all time? I was going to turn Akili Smith into something, but no, I agreed.
I'm a Bengals
Bart Starr
fan.
wasn't a good quarterback.
The Akili Smith thing still bothers me. I'm a Bengals fan. I have a hard time letting things go. You know that. But, I mean, my big thing with Starr is, I mean, the first thing I look for in a quarterback is a leader. And I think he was a great leader.
He's a leader.
He is the only quarterback in NFL history that had a passer rating over 100 in every playoff and championship game he played in. He led them to 5 NFL championships. And if you remember, most of those games were close games, especially the 2 Cowboys games. I mean, the Ice Bowl, he led the team down the field to win the game. I mean, I think there was a couple pass completions there in minus 12-degree weather that the Cowboys were having a hard time doing. And really, the Cowboys were a better team than them that year, probably.
They were. That was the worst of the Lombardi teams, other than maybe '64.
And see,
all respect to Bart Starr and everything. I guess one of the reasons why maybe I've got him a little lower is because I look at him compared to his peers in the framework of the way the game was played back then. He really hardly threw the ball. They always had the number 1 run game. They handed the ball off a lot. Now, yes, he called his own plays. He was the general. The thinking man's quarterback, they called him. The quiet assassin, they called him. But, he had like the number 1 defense. I look at him truly as a system quarterback. It doesn't mean that he wasn't good. It's just you never really see him put a team on his back and go make the winning throw. Now, all respect to the 1-yard sneak, it's just to me not quite the same as like the catch or like Elway's 98-yard drive.
It's the 2 or 3 passes in the last couple of minutes of that game to get him into that position.
Right, and he did. No question about it. But when I think of Bart Starr, I think of only like maybe 3 games. They got the 66 NFL championship where he threw 4 touchdowns, the Ice Bowl, which easily could have been lost, and then Super Bowls 1 and 2. I don't really think of Bart Starr as Captain Comeback or just going down the field. And it was more Jim Taylor. It was more the defense. It was the whole machine. I just don't think of him individually You look at his numbers compared to his peers in the framework of the 1960s. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult for me, So I'm still working out kind of where I'm at with comparing them to modern players. But I still think he was a great player. I think he accomplished a lot of amazing things. Just maybe not quite for my top 10.
Well, who's your number 7?
I've got Ken Stabler.
Oh no, you're kidding me.
Now before you kill me here, I kind of threw this the first 6 I was good. I didn't really get to explain Steve Young, but
mine's Steve Young, so we can both explain him, and there's really no argument there. We can explain Steve Young though if you want.
Sure. The guy had 6 passing titles, which was I don't know that we're going to see that again, just because of the way the NFL is now. Only Jim Harbaugh interrupted that streak in 1995. Otherwise, he might have had 7 in a row. He, 2-time league MVP, got the Super Bowl, played in the shadow of Joe Montana. Probably could have done more if he had been given more of a chance to play. I think he got between 10 and 15 really good fourth quarter comebacks, including the catch number 2 versus Green Bay. To me, a great leader. The guy could have been a running back. He's so athletic, could do so many different things, and be able to, for what he accomplished during those 8 seasons, had he not had suffered the concussions, it would have been really interesting to see just how much more he could have done.
Well, I think the interesting thing with Steve Young is, if you remember, he spent his first, year or 2 in the USFL.
Yeah.
Then he was stuck in the Siberia of the NFL at the time, which was Tampa Bay. And then he had to back up Montana for 3 or 4. So really, he's missing 6 or 7 of his early years, which if he has those years, he may be a lot higher than number 7.
Absolutely. And basically with Tampa Bay, they essentially told him they didn't really have a good system or an offense. They basically said, Steve, get out there and make something happen.
Yeah, that's the only chance they had with that.
Right.
So now that brings us to Ken Stabler.
Well, now let me clarify again. I felt pretty comfortable with my first 6. The last 4, I just grabbed a handful of names, and my standard kind of was, how clutch were you, and did you at some point have to take a team on your back and go win? And I think of that when I think of Ken Stabler. How many of those big named games were because he did something great, goes to the post. See a hand. He actually made a really great play in the Immaculate Reception game. I think he ran a 30-yard run to go up 7-6. I just think of winning when I think of the Snake, and that doesn't mean I'm not married to him at number 7.
Well, my biggest problem with him is the fact that I believe he threw more career interceptions than touchdowns, even.
Yeah, that was, and I did not look up his numbers.
Yeah, I think
that's negligence on my part. And that's
I'm not real sure on that
good thing.
Because really, when I listed everybody, it was a great quarterback. He came out somewhere between 20 and 30 for me, and my main reason was this: he won a lot of games like that, but he won 1 Super Bowl. He had a great team, and he really never could get past, the Steelers. He got past them in 1 year, and then when I watched him play, he was a great leader, and that's what made him a really good quarterback. I just don't see a top 10 quarterback as a guy that throws more picks than touchdowns. I know the NFL was different back then. You could jam receivers all the way down the field. The game was more of a deep passing game. But I don't really see him as a top 10 quarterback, but we can agree to disagree.
No, like I said, I'm still working through that. I've got probably about 15 guys I'm trying to work into those last 3 or 4 slots, and I think you can make a case for several of them.
My big one that I left out was Kurt Warner.
Yeah, I got him at number 11 or 12. I wish he could have just won one of those last 2 Super Bowls that he played. I think it'd be a really easy top 10.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, the most impressive thing in NFL history may be taking the Cardinals to the Super Bowl.
Agreed. And the way that he did it, the numbers that he put up. I think he's out of the 3 highest yards in the Super Bowl. I think he's got 2 of them.
Let's see.
I could be wrong on that, but
we got like 6 minutes, so we got to pick it up. We're talking too much.
Okay.
Who you got at number 8?
Peyton Manning.
I got Dan Marino.
I got Marino right below him. So I mean, I put Manning above him because he did get the 1 Super Bowl.
He got the 1 Super Bowl against Rex Grossman. Yes. To me, number 1, I think Peyton Manning's got 9 one-and-dones. I've got him at number 10. I mean, the 9 one-and-dones are a killer to me. I mean, Andy Dalton's got to lose in the first round 5 more times to equal that. And that's a lot of first-round losses, trust me.
I had him in the top 5 until the last 3 years.
Well, see, my other problem with Manning is this. It's not like people say, well, he didn't have a great defense. He had a good enough defense. He had Edgerrin James. They were good enough that on multiple occasions he was a 1 or 2 seed and lost at home in games that they were favored by a touchdown or more. I mean, I think San Diego got him a couple times. Pittsburgh got him once. Tennessee got him once in '99. Even though, looking back, Tennessee was a better team, so I wouldn't hold that against him. But, I mean, it seems like even in college when he was at Tennessee, he never could beat Florida. I mean, a year or 2 after he leaves Tennessee, they win a national championship with T. Martin, who beats Florida. I mean, it may be unfair.
He does really make a great bridesmaid.
Yeah, he makes a great bridesmaid, but never a bride. I mean, the only reason he's in my top 10 is he set so many records that you can't ignore him. And people may say, well, Brett Favre set a lot of records. But the thing is this, Peyton Manning, outside of some playoff loss records and overall regular season records, Brett Favre owns all the bad ones, too.
Exactly, and Peyton Manning lost 2011, and he's a full 2 years younger, and he's already ahead of him in almost everything.
Yeah, and I mean, Dan Marino, to me, was a great regular season quarterback. That's undeniable. But his postseason numbers are not great. People say he had a lack of defense, lack of running game, similar to Elway, who made it to 3 Super Bowls in the same situation. He lost home playoff games. In '83, they were a 10-point favorite against Seattle, a Seattle team. It's the first time they'd ever been in the playoffs and lost. '85, they played New England at home. They lost 31-14. I think he threw 3 or 4 picks. '92, they actually had the 9th-ranked defense, the 5th-ranked running game. They played Buffalo, and they're the number 1 seed.
Like a 29-10 game?
Yeah, and they got destroyed. He throws 3 picks again. So, I mean, and a lot of people say he had no running game, but from everything I've heard, I mean, he didn't want a running game.
Right.
I mean, he wanted to put up, to me, he was a numbers guy, and that was about it. And the other thing about him is, how many guys do you see that were former Dolphins that played with him that come out and say what a great guy he was or a great quarterback he was even?
I don't really hear that.
Yeah, where, when they talk about Montana, Brady, I mean, even Manning, these guys talk about him like that. So, I mean, who's left in your top 10 we haven't went through yet? I got one left.
Well, I got kind of a tie between Troy Aikman and Jim Kelly. Aikman was the better big game quarterback. He ended up beating him head-to-head, but, boy, to me, if Scott Norwood makes that blasted field goal in 1990, Jim Kelly's legacy is so different. So, same with Marv Levy.
Well, my problem with that is this, though. The Bills were a lot better, a lot more talented team than the Giants. Marv Levy got out-coached.
Yeah, he did.
That's why they lost the game. I mean, I don't think Jim Kelly, I don't have him near my top 20. I respect your opinion, but I just don't see him there. I mean, there's guys like Kurt Warner that aren't in our top 10 that I think were far superior.
I'm battling out with like 7 guys.
My other one was Terry Bradshaw. I had him at number 9 right before Peyton Manning, who was 10. Bradshaw, when you look at his record, I think he only had 9 300-yard games in his career. But
he's got
I think
3 or 4.
Disease. Yeah, 3 or 4. He didn't throw as many picks, though, and he beat Stabler more than Stabler beat him. And
That's true, too.
I mean, but he won 4 Super Bowls. He was the MVP in 2 of them. Super Bowl 14, which was probably the greatest Super Bowl up until that time, which people forget about. I mean, they're down 19-17 going into the fourth quarter, and he played a great fourth quarter, made a couple of huge touchdown passes to win them the game. Same thing, Super Bowl 13, they beat a great Cowboy team where he puts up 35 points. He threw a couple picks early but comes back to throw 4 touchdown passes. I mean, I think he was a great leader and a great quarterback. I mean, if you watch him, it doesn't look that great, especially in the regular season, but I want a guy this big when it's clutch.
Yeah, there's no denying that, because what he did in the Super Bowl, that's the essence of what makes great quarterbacking.
Yeah. And, I mean, it's just there's a lot of guys that were great quarterbacks that we didn't put on here. I mean, I know people will be mad about Brett Favre, but my big thing is this. The guys that are playing today, I think there's 4 or 5 guys that could replace the guys 6 through 10 or even higher before they're done. Guys like Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I can see Aaron Rodgers being number 1 by the time he's done if he can get Mike McCarthy out as the head coach.
There's definitely something to be said for that. There's a lot of people here, and if 2010 goes different, they're running Mike McCarthy out if they don't have a ring at this point. Yeah,
but instead they run out the special teams coach and the backup tight end, the third-string tight end, when, I mean, Mike McCarthy's the one that lost them the game. I think a guy like Drew Brees is borderline. If he could get another Super Bowl, which I don't know if he can, as bad as the Saints have messed up their roster and their salary cap. Big Ben Roethlisberger. And I'll throw another name at you, Joe Flacco. I don't see how you can ignore a guy that has been as successful as he is in the playoffs.
I don't like Joe Flacco that much, but there's no denying.
You're a 49er fan. I don't like Joe Montana that much either.
We didn't lose because of Joe Flacco. I respect what Joe Flacco did.
He sure threw a fair amount of touchdown passes, and didn't he throw like 3 touchdowns in that game?
Yeah, he did play well. He did play well.
Okay. I think he had something to do with it.
Oh, he did. I respect him because Baltimore's road record in the playoffs. That's amazing. And Joe Flacco isn't throwing picks on the road. They're winning football games on the road, and they always give Tom Brady and the Patriots a hard time. Not a lot.
I just remembered something too. We forgot about something.
What's that?
I think Troy fell asleep in here on us. You think Troy disappeared?
I don't hear him.
No, I did not disappear. I had my phone on mute. I was listening to the show. I'm enjoying the show. I got it on the
now
studio.
I think we're in archive time. And hey, Troy, when we go to archive time, doesn't the guy that called in have to sing?
Yeah, I guess that's the way we do it. Yeah. Anybody
you usually sing a duet with the guy that calls in, right?
Yeah, you can't break news on this. This is Blog Talk Radio. Nothing's going to break. So, whatever high note you need to hit, go ahead and hit it.
Well, what's your opinion on the top? What's your opinion on your top 10, Troy?
I like it. You guys threw a lot of good names out there, and Coach, I'm with you. Everybody says Brett Favre. I am a diehard Green Bay Packer fan, and I'll tell you what, Brett Favre cost us 3 more Super Bowls. I still think when people tell me Brett Favre, I still think of the overtime interception that he threw against the Giants. He should have checked that ball down and shouldn't have tried to force it to Donald Driver. If he does it, they can go down and they can score. They can go. I think back to the Philadelphia game when he heaved up this stupid throw in his own territory, I know the defense gave up the big 4th down play, but what the hell is Brett Favre doing just throwing the ball up like we're playing 50-50 in the backyard? And we're playing 500, and who's going to catch this ball? Throw it as high as we can. See who can catch it. Stupid throws like that, especially in the playoffs, really sit bad with me when I come to putting Brett Favre in as a top quarterback. And the longevity, records, you know what? You guys had talked about it. I throw it out the window. I look at top quarterbacks, who are the guys that you can count on to win games? And Brett Favre is a guy that, yes, won a lot of games. But how many games did he cost the Packers? I mean, that's what I look at because as a Packer fan, I have nothing but respect for Brett Favre. He brought a Lombardi Trophy back to Green Bay, got us back on the winning way, but you get greedy. And had he just been, and I'll say it this way, had Brett Favre just been a little bit better than average quarterback in the playoffs instead of a gunslinger, we may have went to 3 more Super Bowls. That's the way I look at it. Now, you live and die with Brett Favre.
I can give you this, though.
But,
and I think Matt can speak to this as a 49er fan. The Super Bowl they won, I mean, didn't the 49ers lose their starting quarterback before that game?
Yeah, we lost. Steve Young had shattered ribs. And going back to that Monday Night Football game in '96 where Don Beebe got the gift touchdown, their only touchdown of the day, that cost us home field advantage. Had to play in the wild card game. Steve Young shatters his ribs. Now you get to play Elvis Gerbach and Desmond Howard. He completely rode Desmond Howard all the way to the Super Bowl.
And I mean, the thing is this, he may have no Super Bowl wins if Steve Young doesn't get hurt.
The Patriots still almost beat him.
Yeah, I mean, Desmond Howard was the star of that game.
What happens if Denver doesn't get upset by Jacksonville? We all know what happened when Denver played them.
Yeah.
Now, granted, the '96 team is a lot better, but...
Yeah, I mean, you guys make great points, and, I'm there with you. There's, people will talk about, well, Brett Favre, then they think immediately of the records. They don't think of the gunslinging mentality. Again, as a Packer fan, I respect that because it did win us some games. But, when you're just a guy like me doing the network and you look at the overall picture and you take the fan part of it away, when you break down him as a quarterback, the interception number sticks out to me. He's the NFL leader in career interceptions because he took chances. Now, the chances did, sometimes they worked out. Sometimes they didn't. So that's my thought, and that's coming from a Packer fan. Coach, and you guys have talked about Bart Starr. I agree with that Bart Starr deserves to be recognized as one of those quarterbacks. Now, could Bart Starr play in today's game? Part of me says yes because of the West Coast offenses that are run, though, because Bart Starr was an accurate quarterback. He doesn't have the arm strength, in my opinion, but the accuracy was there. And you look at some of these quarterbacks today with the West Coast offense and the check down plays and the intelligence needed, I think Bart Starr was a very intelligent quarterback. Coach, you made the point about running the ship, and that's what Bart Starr did. He ran the ship, and he didn't make mistakes. Because if he made a mistake, he was probably going to get his ass reamed when he went over to the sideline. He was probably scared of making a mistake. But he was a very good quarterback for his time. And I agree that, when it comes down to it, he really understood the game, and he was a student of the game. Now, he couldn't coach with a diddly when he took over the Packers, but quarterback-wise, Bart Starr knew how to play the game. But I liked you guys, the way that you're talking. The Jim Kelly, Troy Aikman at the bottom of the list. I mean, you look at those guys, and I look at Aikman as a guy that had a lot of talent around him, but it's kind of like the Bart Starr mentality. He was a guy that was called on not to make mistakes, and he led the team, and when he had to make a throw, he made a throw. And that's the things that I look at when you rank a top 10 quarterback.
I think
the thing that hurts the ball in the guy's hand. Oh, go ahead.
I think the thing that hurts Aikman is the fact that his teams were so good that he didn't have too many opportunities to make a comeback.
When did Troy Aikman ever have to put the Cowboys on his back and go win a game?
Yeah, but I mean,
that's the thing.
Really,
they were so good.
Yeah, and the thing is this, the teams they played in the Super Bowl were not the best teams in the world. I mean, San Francisco, if you look at it, if the Bengals don't put up a game twice and they get blown out twice and Joe Montana's sitting there with 4 blowout wins in the Super Bowl, is he still considered as great as he would have been? I mean, would he still be considered great without the 92-yard drive in the Super Bowl?
Exactly. They would just say, well, he was just on a great team and didn't play anybody. But it really was those Bengal games that made Joe Montana's legacy a lot more rock solid.
To me, I know we've talked about this before, but Troy Aikman was the most perfect quarterback I've ever seen. His footwork was immaculate.
It was so accurate.
His release was immaculate. So, I mean, the thing that holds him back is the fact that he played on, I know you won't like this because of the 84 Niners, Matt, but the 92 Cowboys were the best team I think I've ever seen. They were complete.
Well, I always thought that 93 team was better.
92 or 93, either one of those teams. But, I mean, defensively, they were great. Offensively, their offensive line may have been the best ever played together. They had,
that's true.
They had one of the greatest fullbacks.
So
one of the greatest running backs, one of the greatest quarterbacks, one of the greatest wide receivers, plus you throw in guys like Alvin Harper, Jay Novacek at tight end. I mean, they were loaded. I mean, the only team really that I've seen that compares to their team is the 84 49ers.
I agree. Those may have been two of the most absolutely complete rosters in the history of the NFL, maybe the 78 Steelers, too.
Yeah.
That sounds great, guys. You did wonderful. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. So, Coach, I'm going to tell you what. We're going to get together this weekend. I'm going to share how to run the studio. You two can run the Grueling Truth every Wednesday.
You said that the last 2 weeks. That's like when my wife wants me to fix the bathroom, and I tell her I'll do it this weekend. Never gets done.
It'll get done, Coach. It'll get done. I'm sorry. I apologize. But I had a hard time getting off the couch because that's all I do. I sit on the couch and do nothing all day. And I didn't feel like getting up and going over to the table and getting the phone to call you. Is that an okay excuse? I
guess. I mean, I got a cordless phone that sits right on my chair with me, but that's all right.
Well, you got to remember, I'm from Wisconsin. I don't do things easy way. I don't get all caught up in that technology, So,
well, your biggest problem is not
to... No, go ahead.
Your biggest problem in that you live in Wisconsin is that you moved to Pittsburgh.
I was going to say, didn't I call a New York number?
Yeah, that's the Blog Talk Radio studio. And so
gotcha.
The studio number is open. Yeah, that's the studio. So, yeah, Coach, all the listeners know that I have all the time in the world, and I'm just lazy. That's
hey,
it.
I just got a hate message on Facebook, too, because of my article.
Which one?
I said the top 10 quarterbacks in history. Guess who is a fan of a certain player that didn't like my list?
Oh, God. Packer fans that love Brett Favre.
It was Brett Favre. I get this message from a guy, and he put, Favre not into top 10 makes this list immediately invalid. Come on, sir.
Well, it's hilarious because I'll tell you, living in Wisconsin and hearing how Packer fans constantly make fun of Bear fans, and, I can understand that, and Jay Cutler and all that stuff. If Jay Cutler had, I believe, Brett Favre since the 1997 NFC Championship game all the way through the 2009 NFC Championship with the Vikings, with his 22 interceptions and his 4-8 record, if that had been Jay Cutler, they'd crucify him. But because
I don't know. I think if Jay Cutler won 4 playoff games, they might build a statue to him.
Yeah, that's true too.
But this is the bad thing. He posted this like right when this show was starting, and I put call this number and we can debate it on the radio. Call in now, and he's never called.
Well, what I find is.
Go ahead.
He's got all the bad records too. If you ask I find if you find it now, some Packer fans are like you, Troy. They're able to look at it and analyze it for what it is. But a lot of them just can't deal with the fact that, if you ask them why does he have the interception record, they say, well, it's because he played so long. And I say, well, okay, now apply that logic to his good records. Because that's why he's got the good records, the streak. The guy played at a high level for a very long time. He was a good quarterback for a very long time. He was very rarely a great quarterback. He had it in him.
Yeah, I
it's the playoff defeats that just do it for me.
Well, and
do this. Just ask. This is the thing. You ask any Brett Favre fan, tell me his greatest moment, and they always tell me the same thing. When he threw all those touchdown passes against the Raiders after his dad died. That was
please. The ones he threw in the triple coverage?
It was the regular season game against the Oakland Raiders, who haven't been good since 2002. I mean, come on. And it's a regular season game. You ask me Joe Montana's best game, I bring up Super Bowl 23 with the drive or Super Bowl 24. Exactly. Most of these guys, if you bring up one of these and say, what's their best game, they don't give you a regular season game. With Peyton Manning and Brett Favre, regular season games and regular season records are what they bring up. And I'm sorry, but the difference between great and very good is the ability to win a championship.
If you, how did Vince Lombardi put it? If you had to win, well, it wasn't Vince Lombardi, but if you got to put all your money on and your life on the line to go win a football game, you're not putting Brett Favre in there. You're putting Montana or Brady in there.
Yeah, and you're not putting Peyton Manning in there.
No.
Or Achilles Smith.
I hate to cut you off, guys. I hate to cut you off, but the studio lady is going to say 45 minutes. That's all you guys get, 30 live, 15 archived. So it's just about over. She's going to hang up on us, and I didn't want you guys to go, hey, what happened? But, hey, Coach, definitely get together. Mark, look forward to having you co-host the show with Coach Goodpaster. So for those fans listening in the archive time, make sure you join in every Wednesday night, 11:30 Eastern.